my name is Thea Sewell. I'm 20 and I am studying philosophy at Christ College. I actually was quite caught up in gender ideology when I was that age. So I think I was about 15, 16, and I very much believed in sort of mantra, trans women are women, trans men are men. And I think partly because I'm a lesbian and maybe because I'm a woman, I think that you can be I was very caught up in wanting to protect members of the LGBT community. Um, and I didn't see any glaring issue with the ideology until someone who was very, very close to me came to me and suggested that I read Material Girls by Kathleen Stock. And I remember being very upset and sort of shocked that this person that I cared about so deeply would have this view. But I thought, I'll have to give it a read, and I'm not going to shut down this friendship because I love this person. So I engaged in, for about a week, some pretty heavy debates with this person. And by the end of the week, I had changed my mind completely because I'd been persuaded by fact. And so I think this was all when I was around 17 or so. And I moved on from then with the knowledge that the gender critical side was right. But I wasn't sort of going to protests or saying my views very openly. I wasn't an activist in any sense. But I did sort of speak to people who were very close to me about my views. I would sometimes try to change other people's minds. Yeah. And then sort of when I come into Cambridge, I was so caught up in other things that I wasn't focused on the issue much at all, not until the Supreme Court ruling. And that entire Easter holidays sort of changed my life and has, well, it's completely changed the course of my life now. I mean, the first two terms of Cambridge were great. I'd arrived, I'd made lots of friends, I was happy. I mean, of course, there are a few issues that arose here and there, but it was on the whole good. And then I go on to the Easter holidays, and I attend a Helen Joyce talk with my family, actually, which is where I met Helen Joyce and also Maeve and Serena, who are now the other co-founders of the society. And I met some other young gender critical women. We had, such stimulating discussion, and it was brilliant. And I felt, wow, I can speak freely, and this is amazing. And after that, the Supreme Court ruling happened, and I go back to Cambridge, and I am just so confused as to why everyone is putting up on their stories this extremely transphobic ruling, and they're condemning it. And I thought, I just cannot see what is wrong with this ruling. It protects gay people, it protects women, and it enshrines the rights of trans people that already existed. It was a clarification rather than a change in law or an implementation of something else. So I found it all very confusing, and I did start to, in quite a understated way, start pressing people a little bit more. And then on my first day back from the Easter, I was speaking to my next door neighbour, who was a good friend of mine, and I showed her Helen Joyce's book, I think, and I said, I've been reading this lately, and I would be interested to know what your thoughts were. I know you're interested in politics. you should maybe give it a read, which I didn't think was going to turn into anything. Um, until, well, then everything sort of started falling apart a few weeks later. It was the 25th of May, and a different friend, completely unrelated to the girl that I had shown the book to, but they were friends, but it wasn't her. And I remember I was walking up into the shared kitchen, and I bump into her, and she was just giving me this look I can't quite describe. And she said that she needed to talk to me about something and asked me directly, "Are you a TERF?" Um, and I was quite shocked. And I said, I think I actually first said, "No, I'm not a TERF." And I still actually would stand by that, because I think that that term doesn't necessarily allow for the nuance um, that my opinion has. I don't think that it's a radical position to believe in biological sex. So, but I think, for colloquial use, TERF is applicable. But I asked her why she thought that, and she said that she knew that I owned some gender critical books, and she knew that I'd gone to the Helen Joyce talk at the Oxford Literary Festival in the Easter. And I said to her, okay, what's the problem with that? I'm a philosophy student. I'm going to own philosophy books. I could also own Mein Kampf. It wouldn't make me a Nazi, but regardless. And her response was that buying books from bigots is the same as being a bigot. Which was interesting. And a funny thing about the books is I checked on the college intranet portal. All three of the books that I was counselled for owning are in the college library. They're in the majority of college libraries at this university. And of course they are. It's a university. You're supposed to encounter views that you disagree with. Bizarre. And so I felt this conversation in the kitchen, I'm feeling quite annoyed at this point. So I decided to walk off, and I ring up the original friend who I'd shown the book to initially. And I asked her, "What's going on? This girl has just come and asked me this. Are you responsible for this?" And I can't prove this. It seemed to me from her response that she was sat in a room with a group of other people, that I was on speaker, and her tone was completely different to anything that it had ever been to my face. She told me that I was a bigot and that everyone deserved to know my hateful views on trans people. I counted, I don't have any hateful views on trans people. It didn't really matter. And then she essentially said, I hope you have a great night, or something to that effect, and hung up the phone. And so that's when I started to get really worried, because I thought, oh goodness, she's really sticking to her guns here. And it seemed like she's going to make it her mission to turn everyone against me. So I panicked. I panicked right then. I think I actually had a panic attack. I called my dad, and I said, "What do I do? What do I do? I don't know what to do." And we decided that the best thing to do would be to go straight to college. So I emailed my personal tutor, and I went for a meeting with him immediately the next morning, I think. I just remember I couldn't sleep at all that night. I remember I went down to his office at 6 a.m. and sat on the steps waiting for him to come. And, Christ College, they really did do everything that they could in this situation, but there wasn't so much that they could do. And I think the first thing that my personal tutor said was, "Don't worry, it's going to blow over." It did not blow over. Over the next week, I had pretty much all of my friends, bar maybe one or two, completely cut me off. We have a college system where you college marry a friend of yours. And I was rung up and divorced by my college wife. She was shouting at me down the phone. Again, it seemed like she was in a place where there were other people present listening in to the conversation. Um, I heard from other people, I heard from different sources that everyone had been gossiping about it in college. And then, I would walk into college, everyone's staring, everyone's giving you horrible looks. Um, I had a few friends come to me and say, I love you, but for social optics, I can't be seen with you in public. Now, that's great until you start to consider, how am I supposed to go to dinner and sit in the dining hall completely by myself? And I don't know, I am appreciative of the people who are still nice to me in private, but it is just kind of exasperating because I'm the one who's completely alone and having to go through this. And it's even more, I think it's actually even more frustrating when you know that they privately agree with you. No. I mean, there's just this terrible culture of fear and a lot of cowardice. I don't know. I think a lot of people, and I think, I mean, the majority of people sort of just stayed out of it. Um, I think that there are a number of hard ideologues who set the tone for college life. They're the loudest voices, but I don't actually believe they're the majority. I mean, I think that most men will agree with you in private. I think that there are a large number of girls who are either not interested in the topic at all or are, but and agree privately, but are very scared. I don't think that the entire college has been captured, but I do think that the small minority make the consequences as such. So I go back to London for 2 weeks because I could not bear to be in college. And on my return, I moved into a different room because when I was in the other room, it was at the point where I felt like I couldn't go to the bathroom because it's shared, and the stress of just walking down the corridor to get a glass of water was too much. So I moved into another building, and nobody knew which building I'd moved into, which was good. And I was transporting my stuff from my old room to my new room in the middle of the night. That's how I was doing it because I was too afraid. And I remember on my return, I go up to my old door in the middle of the night to get some stuff, and turf had been scratched into my door. I mean, it is just bizarre. And around this time, the senior tutor of the college put out an email to the entire student population saying, free speech exists, gender critical is a protected belief, you know, please. And in response, the JCR wrote an email less than 24 hours later. And there's so much gossip around college. Like I knew this was coming before it came, right? And it didn't name me, which is good. But I think it was called something along the line of in support of the transgender members of college. And this email, I mean, it implies that I discriminated against somebody. And I'll say that because the next day, everybody, and I know this because of different sources, everyone on the MCR group chat was saying it can't only be because she had 3 books. She must have discriminated against a trans person. And then, yeah, I mean, crazy. It also makes sort of hints that if you don't use people's preferred pronouns, then it's discrimination, which I would argue is a form of compelled speech. There was a whole array of things in that email, and it was an open letter that was signed by the entire JCR. So again, kind of just setting the tone for the rest of college of this is whose side we're taking. This is and Thea can be out on her own. After that, there was a sort of long saga of events and conversations happening between college and the JCR and all of this. And I just remember absolutely nobody speaking to me. And the only time I did speak to someone, they told me that everyone had been contemplating when I was in London whether I had committed suicide. And I just thought, if you're thinking that I might have committed suicide, why did nobody send me a message? I think I got one message from one kind person just saying, "Are you okay?" But I just find that to be really despicable. Um, and then, as a sort of final note at the end of term, the master ended up having to step in, and he put out a message which essentially said that I had been bullied, and that ostracism wasn't acceptable, and writing turf on someone's door isn't acceptable. But yeah, I mean, honestly, it's just incredibly childish behaviour from my peer group. But what can you do? Funny enough, there's something I omitted to mention earlier that during the first phase of my cancellation, when it was all just happening, I reached out to one of the only young gender critical women I knew at the time, who was Maeve. And Maeve and actually Serena came and sat with me in the buttery, and we had some drinks, which was great. And they really sort of showed up for me and showed support. And I mean, it was really special because I was in such a dark place. And then over the summer, we all sort of started to hang out more and more and more. I think it was Maeve. Maeve came up to me in the pub and said, "Thea, we need to set up a society in Cambridge, and I also need to let you know that I'm coming to Cambridge for my MPhil." I just thought, thank God, I'm not going to be alone. Now we have hope. And I think it was very important for me as well at the beginning of term. I mean, we'd had this sort of vague idea that we were going to set up a society, but then in that first week of term, it just became more clear how important it was that we have one at society. I mean, the first email that the JCR sent out to the new freshers and the new members of college was a note about the Gender Expression Fund and how they could buy stand up to pee devices and chest forms. And I just thought, this is indoctrination again. I mean, there may be a sort of young gender critical girl who's joining as part of the new freshers group, and the first thing she sees is this. And I just think, I mean, it's just setting this tone of political indoctrination of this is what the status quo is. If you disagree, then you're going against all of us, the JCR, the members of college, and it really upsets me. So, and then Maeve, of course, she went to the Freshers' Fair, and there were no women-only groups, and so it just became ever the more clear how desperately we needed it. And honestly, I mean, the group was put together very, very quickly. We acted quickly. We got it all done in about a week, in terms of the setting up. And I don't know. I mean, I don't know what I was really expecting. It's been interesting because, of course, there's been so much backlash, but there's also been so much support. And it's one of the best things in my life at the moment. The new members that we've been vetting, the new members that have been coming in and meeting, and they are just some of the most brilliant women that I've had the pleasure of knowing. Feminist groups sort of trying to mobilize against us and shut us down and sign open letters. But I mean, that's all right, They they are free to speak, in my opinion. But it can get a little much. I think that the biggest sort of change for me was I used to be able to sort of go to the pub and be able to avoid people I knew spotting me. But now it's sort of constant. If I walk out of college, I will definitely walk past people who are whispering or grabbing each other or pointing or even taking pictures. People have been taking pictures of me in public, especially when I'm sat down um, in the pub or anywhere. I mean, I've had, and it's very strange the way they do it. They'll sort of pretend to be taking a selfie or something, but I remember seeing in the reflection in the mirror behind them that they were taking a picture of me, and I just think, what are you doing? Oh yeah, yeah. The philosophy cohort as well. I mean, I got a message from someone in my philosophy cohort um, saying that my views are completely reprehensible, things like that. I mean, I mean, it's spread beyond Cambridge as well. My first love from school messaged me saying, "You're disgusting. I'm ashamed to know you, you bigot." So that's great. But I mean, what can you do? I think it's really a sort of waiting game. It's incredibly frustrating because, legally, uh, we won. In the media, we're slowly starting to see improvement in the rest of the world, in the other spheres. But universities seem to be the last place to fall, and I don't know why that is. Um, I think it's just I think that the silence of the academics definitely plays into it. And I think that universities have allowed the students to take control of the narrative. And I think something really needs to be done about that. I think it's a very difficult question to answer, and I don't think I'll be able to answer it properly until the end of the year because of course, in my meetings with CUSW, we're seeing some amazing freedom of speech and beautiful conversations and controversial conversations. Um, but outside of that, I don't see very much of it going on. I think that things will change. I really, really do have faith and hope. But I think it's going to take a while. And I mean, I think it's also very college specific. Every college seems to be quite different. I mean, my experience of Christ, for example, versus Serena's at Newnham, um, you know, at least the professors and academics in my college are supporting me. Uh, Serena doesn't have that, and neither does Maeve. So I think it really matters who's sort of in charge. I'd say I know that it's really difficult, but speaking freely and speaking truthfully is one of the best things that you can do for everybody around you, but also for yourself. I have never felt more of a sense of integrity, and that gives me a lot of sort of confidence in myself. I think that self censorship really erodes your sense of self. Um, and being cowardly makes you feel like a coward, and that's not a very nice feeling either. So, I mean, I'm not saying that people need to go completely out of their way and blow up their lives. Of course not. But listening to each other and starting to say what you actually think um, really is it's where we need to go. And I think one last thing, it's fine to disagree with your friends, disagree loudly, and then go for a pint after. That's my line.